Sharri, what do you make of this mess? Obviously, we've known on Twitter everything's a double standard, but do you think the Twitter journalists who constantly expose themselves as being biased on issues are being unfair when they target conservative journalists or TV presenters?
Yeah, look, Peta Credlin has never attempted to say she's an objective journalist. She's a commentator. She hosts a prime-time television show every night on Sky. The biggest issue in the country at the moment has been the lockdown of Victorians. Even when there's only been 1 or 2 new cases a day, Victorians remain in lockdown, suffering serious mental health issues. Peta Credlin would have, I assume, put in numerous interview requests, like we all have on Sky, for Daniel Andrews. He obviously declined them. So what did she do? She went to the press conference to ask him tough questions on behalf of Victorians. That is exactly what she should do. And while she has a background, clearly as Abbott's chief of staff, and also she's a trained lawyer, she practiced journalism. This is journalism. She asked him hard questions. As you said, she did her research. She established that there were 6 missing minutes, 6 minutes, where the decision to use private security guards was used, and she pressed the Premier on that, and those minutes, those phone records, then had to be tendered to the inquiry. So, you know, she did a brilliant job. There are other journalists, particularly from the Australian, who have been doing a brilliant job. I just want to quickly contrast that, Jack, with Raph Epstein, an ABC radio host who also has turned up to Daniel Andrews' press conferences. His first question this week at Daniel Andrews' press conference was about why Brett Sutton had been photographed by the Australian newspaper and whether that was necessary. Seriously. And of course, it gave Daniel Andrews the opportunity to say that he didn't know why a newspaper needed to photograph Brett Sutton, and there's many photographs of him. I mean, this is seriously what Raph Epstein thinks is the most important thing to grill the Premier on. I mean, it's just, you know, beyond words.
Yeah, and Rebecca, what do you make of it? I mean, obviously, Peta Credlin, she is a television host, but as Sharri says, she doesn't claim to be a journalist, but she has still, quite embarrassingly, done a better job than all of these self-proclaimed journalists who have been attending.
Absolutely. And to follow up on your point about Barry Cassidy, before Barry Cassidy, for those viewers my age, we had Kerry O'Brien, or as we affectionately called him, Red Kez. And Kerry had been an advisor to Labor Prime Minister Gough Whitlam. So, you know, this idea that you can't go into journalism or it's a problem if you've worked as a political advisor, clearly only applies if it's a politician from the right, at least as far as the ABC is concerned. More generally, I think Peta Credlin has just done an outstanding job, you know, and it's riveting to see. I think many of us have sat down every day and watched what's, you know, called the Daily Dan, you know, where Dan Andrews kind of steps forward and says, I'll stay here as long as you want. Yes, and answer either sort of pathetic questions or not answer them, say, oh, well, I'll get back to you on that, and then doesn't get back to journalists. I think Rachel Baxendale at The Australian, I think there's journalists at The Age and at the Herald Sun who have done a good job, but Peta Credlin, you've got to say, what a class act. And it just shows that at the heart of good journalism is the ability just to ask, to work out what is the question that needs to be answered and to ask that tough question. And you can have all the degrees in the world. I think Dennis Muller, for example, puts himself forward as some sort of an expert in this field in academia. But it comes down to, can you ask that tough question? And the results speak to themselves. One resignation already, and I expect there'll be more.